So the idea of pre-painted miniatures in wargaming. We looked at this easily a couple of months ago, but I want to revisit it for a second. I've jumped in unexpectedly to Pacific Rim Extinction. This is a miniatures war game. You've got your kaiju, you've got your Jaeger mechs. You're going to go and just beat on some things, roll some dice, blow some stuff up, smash around the city. Pretty straightforward, fast playing rules. A lot of interesting options, and I'm getting a little bit off topic, but the thing that you notice first, the pre-painted miniatures, both the Jaeger mechs and the kaiju, they're ready to go. They're ready to go. The scale is a heroic scale. They're really, really big, almost action figure scale. The pre-paints, metallics, dry brushing, some highlighting, some basic highlighting on there. Easily tabletop quality plus, right out of the box. And what has me wondering is, as soon as something becomes standard through one or two companies, everyone else is forced to adopt. Do people still pay for a data plan on your phone? I mean, I guess you can, but there's been a huge push towards now it's like, hey, you have to buy all in and you have unlimited data. Or, back in the day, you'd upgrade your phone. You'd get a new phone if you sign on for a new contract. Every 2 or 3 years, they'd give you a free phone. And somebody started, maybe it was AT&T, somebody started where it's like, no, we're not giving anything free anymore. You buy your $3,000 iPhone and you pay it off every month. And as soon as they did that, everyone else adopts that. So there certainly is this kind of industry standard. And as the lines between board gaming, tongue twister, and wargaming, as they blur, I think as soon as one or two companies start to innovate and become the standard, that's it. So let's look at Conan, the board game. I love Conan, the IP. I love playing it. It's a board game in that it has dice and lots of miniatures and you move around. But it could easily be interpreted and is essentially a skirmish game on there. It's essentially a miniatures skirmish game with dice and activation and management of resources. We see something like Zombicide, where miniature games used to be a few in the board gaming area. Now you get lots and lots of miniatures. We pull out something like Zombicide Invader, and I've got more miniatures than my buddy playing Warhammer 40K on there. So people are getting used to miniatures. They're out there. They're no longer the exclusive domain. And as a result, over time, I believe if we look at both miniature games and board games over the past, 5 to 8 years, maybe 10, the evolution of the molds and pushing things out has the level of detail, what's expected in board gaming quality miniatures, is pretty fierce. So now we have something like Pacific Rim where the miniatures look fantastic. They're pre-painted. They are the best pre-painted miniatures that I've seen. And when I pulled them out, the shelf appeal is amazing. When I pulled them out, I'm like, okay, I need to go through the rest of my collection. We're going to throw board gaming in there and see some of the other pre-painted stuff. So we have Mage Knight. You've got Mage Knight Ultimate Edition, which has the premium sculpts. I mean, it's WizKids. It's what you get, and you're going to like it. And if you don't, too bad on there. But it is pre-painted, but it's kind of primitive pre-painted. But all right, Mage Knight, same molds from when did it release? 2012, 2011, 2013, somewhere on there. Back in the day, and this was big, Clusterphobia had pre-painted miniatures that looked really well. They were just a little bit flat on the paints. If they had used a little bit of a wash on it, that would have made a huge difference. But from my perspective, without going into premium like for Arkham Horror and other things, there's not a lot of pre-painted miniatures. Now we're seeing, Sundrop, Nemesis, and a few others, this idea that they're taking the miniatures and they're hitting them up with a wash on there. And certainly that brings out a lot of detail. And for a board gaming piece, it does a lot. But I'm looking at Pacific Rim and I'm saying, this is fantastic looking. We don't have to paint anything. it's tabletop or above. It's utilizing some actual paint techniques, again, some dry brushing, some basic highlights on there. How is this not going to become standard? You see something like this for the price point of the game and other games that are out there, how could you go back? Now, I don't see pre-painted happening for something like Warhammer 40,000. The whole entire business model for Games Workshop is building your miniatures, painting your miniatures. I mean, that's a separate element. That's a big thing to jump into on there. Absolutely on there. On the flip side, something like Chain of Command, historicals, World War II gaming, DBA, DBN, you're painting the actual units and you're trying to recreate a battlefield on there. That's kind of a separate hobby too. But for all of those games that are in the middle there, so to speak, where it's a miniatures game, it's a collectibles game, like Pacific Rim, then how could we not have pre-painted? And this just shows me the level of shelf appeal and detail. I don't know what secret sauce they have in the factory, but obviously, look, it's definitely possible. And it almost has the appearance of a collectible toy on there. So will we see more and more of this? When, I guess the question is, and maybe we'll revisit it in a year from now, when is that tipping point? When are consumers going to look and say, hey, point out something like Pacific Rim and say, look what's possible here, literally right out of the box, ready to go, looks amazing. This is like something you have on your shelf or your computer, your desk at work to kind of look at, and it's a playing piece for a game. How am I going to go back to that gray unpainted? How am I going to go back to those miniatures on there? Interesting. And that's before we even get into 3D printers on there. And I guess a follow-up question and an end question, I don't know enough of the tech, but just I know in the past 3 or 4 years, literally the evolution of 3D printers, at some point, I see some of the BattleTech miniatures that are being printed, 3D printed. At some point, are they going to be able to inject color into there and mix color, color strands and do that? So at some point, I don't know what, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, are we going to have color 3D printers? I mean, just the tech level is moving up so quick. But what do you guys think about pre-painted miniatures? Are we at that tipping point? Because there certainly are some proof of concept where it's like in a mass market, mass production, take a look at what's possible.